Hi everybody, thanks for listening. I'm here today with Patrick Dixon, and we've been discussing anthroposophy for some years now, and I've asked Patrick to come on the show because we wanted to talk about what was happening today in this contemporary world and what Rudolf Steiner was trying to warn us about. So Patrick, what would you say is happening?
Well, in a sense, we're living at this time under the dome, you could say, of materialism. What does that mean? In occult science, there's said to be 12 great philosophical systems. Each one, the sign of a zodiac shines through it. It gives us a particular perspective on reality. And you can only have a complete, real experience when you look through all 12. But if you get restricted to one, you get a very strong concentrated activity of that. And materialism, and when I say, what is materialism? Well, it's reinforced by certain theories in modern science. The basic belief is, on one level, everything came up by chance, and this whole evolution is by chance, and it also has no real purpose. There's nothing conscious behind all the phenomena in the universe. The universe, one of the great signatures of materialism is thing. The universe is a thing. The world, the earth, is a thing, and basically all beings are really things. Whatever you conceive of as being, and of course in the materialistic world conception, the idea of a soul is a non-existent fantasy. So consciousness is just a sort of little thing that arises by chance out of the complex interaction of anatomy and physiology. And this, of course, is a profound untruth behind one-sided materialism, because it's like saying that a radio set, for instance, out of its components and the materials out of which it's made, produces the programs that come out of it. The radio set is not a generator of the programs, just as the brain does not generate consciousness. The brain is a receiver and transmitter, and that idea is a completely opposite of the mainstream materialistic idea. And of course, what's happened on the Earth now, our science, particularly the world of physics and its two poles, astro and particle physics, are labor under that, and have been put on a pedestal as being the sort of primary, the alpha and omega of science, because physics, what they say is that what is in the physics, what we investigate, is what will last. That's forever, ever. Nothing else has. Between particle physics and astrophysics, everything else in between actually, ultimately has no meaning. It's just life, and life is just what chance. But anyway, that's all going to be extinguished. Consciousness never existed outside the Earth anyway. So that's their great dogma. The dogma of modern science, I've said it before, is not that we know what's out there. We don't even know that, but we know what's not there. And that's their great denial. And yes, physics works on the Earth up to an extent to create machines, but then you have to ask yourself, what are machines? What is technology? And a complete misunderstanding of what that is. I mean, to understand what technology is within the greater world conception, evolution, is that in the early stages of the Earth's existence, there are many beings involved in the creation and design, and the whole project was the cosmic humanity, the cosmic human being, who out of which everything has gone into and everything would come out of in the future. And this process was going on, and Steiner speaks about 3 supersensible incarnations. 2,000 years before Christ, there was Lucifer. 2,000 years after Christ, will be Ahriman. And those are 2 necessary beings. They're the same influences were experienced in the temptation in the wilderness. The temptation was to tempt the seeds of the divine, immortal humanity, which is going to be the legacy of all human beings if they so choose it. The temptation was to pull us away from that, tempt that being, which is potentially the seed of all our being, to deny that and fall for a short-term power, offered all the power of the earth as it is now, I'll give you this, make bread from stones, all those short, rather than waiting for the greater picture to evolve, having to go through this process. So, and in a way, the whole mystery of the earth cannot be, on the first level, cannot be separated from what the human being is. The human being, even though they may not be conscious of it, is having an effect on every phenomena. I mean, even earthquakes, all these things. One day we'll wake up and we'll realize that our consciousness, our behavior, our feelings, our desires are working into the elemental structure of the earth and causing things to happen. Now, because of various processes, this at the moment has a delayed thing. So the cause comes out unconsciously, and then later it's hit back. It's like an echo comes back from the elemental. So therefore it's not easy to perceive. But the more advanced a being gets, the shorter the time goes between what comes out of you inwardly and what comes back outwardly. So that it's like a karmic thing. The karmic response is very quick. In a highly developed initiate, it's immediate. So if you do something that's morally reprehensible, you immediately feel it, maybe in your body. In a less developed being, you might have to wait a lifetime before you see the effects. But going back to the technology thing, the mystery of the divine mystery of the incarnation, and then the crucifixion, and then the descent into hell, what does that mean? That is going down into all the as yet untransformed memories of the great cosmic activities and processes that created the earth. Because those beings who are the creator beings had to withdraw at a certain point and put over the sustaining of the earth to the preserver beings, some of the elemental beings, who kept the archetypes going until the human being could wake up and become master of those themselves. But the memories, they would, in a sense, you could use in computer language, which is quite valid really, were downloaded into the interior of the earth. And they were held by these beings called Ahrimanic beings. Steiner speaks about Ahriman. First it became apparent to humanity at the time of Zarathustra as a being who was opposed to the God of light. But in a way, ultimately, it seemed that it was a necessary thing. But those memories, those archetypes of creation, were downloaded, while meanwhile the hierarchies were also working on other things, and they would take up the souls leaving the earth and to help them reform for a new incarnation. So you've got this tremendous dynamic of souls excarnating, going through processes, all kinds of coming down again into the earth as a new impulse. Simultaneously, you've got this holding on to the primal memories. And because of the descent into hell, and then the coming back and the resurrection, those memories of those particular activities of the hierarchies were able to surface in humanity. And this brought about the awakening to, you could say, the technological laws, the laws of mechanics, all those things which we have to go through. They are memories of living activity pressed down into mechanical dead laws. And they became, first in the Renaissance, then very strongly in the so-called Enlightenment, where all these new ideas about science existed. But one thing that wasn't, they were completely extracted, was any kind of, religious or spiritual idea. They were just trying to explain every phenomena, everything, and there's emphasizing thing, according to those laws. And this, though there were individual scientists who still maintained a spiritual thing, but it couldn't really properly connect with those, because what came up with those memories was that the Ahrimanic forces had stripped away all the spirituality from those memories, and they were seen as purely mechanical laws. So what happened is that even though they had all these brilliant ideas in the Renaissance, and particularly in the Enlightenment, what went with it was a kind of infectious atheism. It was the beginning of this kind of denial of any spirituality, which hardened, and this was also activated in a reactivation of what happened in the famous Gandhi Shapuran Academy, where the idea of the human being could be constructed without understanding the mystery of Golgotha, of the Christ, or the spiritual evolution. All these things came together, and this is what today Steiner speaks about, the incarnation of Ahriman. This was Ahriman seeing that now he could come up to the surface and could infect human beings with his own brilliance. And they didn't know it was him. They were thinking they were brilliant, just only. But this was a preparation for Ahriman to come in full force to his incarnation, where his purpose would be to mechanize the whole earth. And the idea behind that is the concept that if you conceive being, all being, as thing, the definition of a thing, as opposed to a being, is a thing is something that can be controlled from outside, whereas a being develops the self-control, self-mastery. So Ahriman wants to, if he's conceived all as things, human beings as things, as numbers, then he has control. Ahriman, you could say, is the cosmic control freak. He wants to control, he wants to impose his own agenda on the earth and to deny the great purpose of the hierarchies. But he won't succeed ultimately. He will have a very good attempt and will get quite far, but he won't ultimately succeed because souls are coming in all the time, waves of beings coming down from higher worlds, bringing, inspired states of being from the higher dimensions, carrying down new perceptions of the world purpose into the incarnation, and that's countering it. And the whole world of the elementals, which Ahrimanic science denies the existence of, that is, say, nature beings behind the visible perception of nature, will start to relate to many of those new souls who are coming in. So a whole awakening, and that's why Ahriman wants to really put humanity to sleep. And he does that by actually giving them faculties, technological faculties, which are like imitations of the capacities that will develop in the future. So there's a whole kind of vision that crosses the earth, virtual reality. All this stuff is to actually prevent the real subtle awakening. And but as I say, Ahrimanic forces won't succeed. But the main thing that Steiner would say is it's very important to wake up to that, to understand the Ahrimanic thought forms. It's like you look at machines and try and see that in every machine you can see disguised in an aggressive mechanistic way divine processes that happened in ancient times, and also prophecies of faculties that will exist in a new way out of the human being. Whereas Ahriman would say, if you look at a car, it's just a car. It's a brilliant machine. I'm the one who inspired it. Whereas actually a car is also a kind of disguised Kabbalistic tree. The spark, the ignition, goes down through all these different worlds, so the wheels turns. That's all these machines are mechanistically decontextualized from their origins, which were divine, cosmic, and they will reawaken as human divine faculties in the future. But we've got to break the spell that Ahriman has cast upon humanity.
So how do we break that spell?
Well, we break that spell by different forms of meditation. I think that what's this idea of looking at machines, trying to see into machine what's that an image of, what's that an image of. It's really giving oneself time to contemplate, to think into processes. I'm going to talk about, and I talk about materiology, the principles, the processes in matter itself. Just thinking about it, like elasticity, plasticity, all those things, meditating on those things, because you're already penetrating into Ahriman's realm. You're not just used or using and being used by it. You're actually thinking about what's become materialized. And that when you do that, when you think about it in the right way, you're already beginning its spiritualization. It's inner activity on the one hand, it's artistic activity, and also things like biodynamic farming. That really helps too, because then you're working with the elemental beings and the cosmic forces. But we're on, the green movement in ecology and the organic movement is a stepping stone towards those forms of awakening. But they will happen. Though, of course, the materialistic science will try and take hold of those and hijack them for their own purposes. One has to be aware of that. This is, and in a sense, those forces are in all of us. But each one of us is responsible for transforming them. And in that process, helping for the whole transformation of the earth.
So it's transforming the ones that are already within us, because we all have them within us, and also the ones that are in the outside world.
Yeah, we can only really work on the outside world when we work on the inner. You know, when we that's the first thing, you know, comes first in a sense. And then when you worked on that, then you get the right inspirations of what to do. But you know, it's like being able to think into the living, when you have a sense of what is really living, what is potential in beings, where they came from. That's getting a right idea of their true evolution, their true origins, and their destiny. What is the destiny of? The destiny is consciousness. In a way, love and consciousness are the true destiny of all phenomena. Should be. That's what we're contributing to. You know.
I think that might be one of my. I'm going to do a mea culpa here, because we were talking earlier about will and love, and how certain black magicians or whatever prefer will over love. And I used to be quite into believing that if I developed my will, then I would then be able to understand everything. But really, love does conquer all.
Well, yeah. Will. I mean, love is. We need enough love to will, and the will to love. But if you put will as its primary thing, and eventually you dispense with love. You don't think it's important. That's a really dark one. You just say, if I can do this, I can do that, then it's great. I'm great. You know what I mean? You're on the path that Nietzsche was on, but he was saved by his own higher self too. Actually, he couldn't do it. He couldn't become the black magician that he could have become had he gone on. But you know, but the will is it's profoundly important. We need to sanctify the will. Our will one day become a profound creative force, but it must not be disconnected from the higher purpose of the gods. You know, but it is that's the signature of black magic. Is that the will that's all it matters. You know, and you can see that in a little way in some characters today who do kind of mentalists and things who do these things of hypnotizing. You can see that a little bit in the side controlling. Instead of controlling yourself, you have no conception of the metamorphosis and transmutation of your own being, but you can do things with other people. I mean, there are many signatures of where will is being misused, even in some rock music and stuff. You know, the whole idea, you've got screaming people, you've got, you know, that whole thing. I mean, whereas often the most significant things happen between one or two people, you know, on the earth. That's where the real processes are going on.
Well, I suppose with the crowd mentality, for like, let's say, a rock concert or any kind of, you know, for very dull music of the popular world today. I know there was a concert in, I think it was Texas last year, and sadly lots of people got trampled. But when we were watching it being played back, we could see these kind of elemental beings as if they were walking across the crowd, and they were dark elemental beings.
Yeah. I mean, they are. I mean, that's an interesting thing. I mean, for instance, if you go to what's different, you go to the Promenade concert. That's quite different. You've got a lot of people standing, but they're very respectful of the artists, because, you know, what most of those artists are, you know, even the average violinist is a highly skilled artist in their own. Whereas if you go to most rock concerts, there are some fine art musicians, but also, you mustn't forget, most of them are incredibly reinforced by technology. You know, the microphones, amplifiers, all this stuff, you know, it's to hype. And some are just have nothing but that. You know, it's just noise, and you know there are many levels even in that. You know, where some is really getting dark, and others is, you know, light and some great music. But it's like, but you've got to be aware when you get people out of themselves in that way. You know, just giving up. Whereas you can have a crowd of people that are entranced in a very conscious way of something. You know, it's a different thing.
Would they be attracting? So, say it was like the rock band we was talking about, more of a dark forces are coming because they like that chaotic feeling, and then if the other one where it's more of a, you know, something that everyone's concentrated on and feeling in tune with that tune, that would be a different kind of elemental then. That would be one working with humanity.
I mean, you've got to say, you know, you listen to, say, Bach or something like that, you know, you've got this amazing music, which also comes out of the archetypes, the higher world archetypes of the geometries of the human body and the earth itself. So that's reinforcing it, whereas some of this other music is literally destroying any awareness that doesn't want that. I mean, there are some rock groups, not very many, who actually admit, I mean, that's one guy who said, I'm on the dark path. There's no way back. You know, you think, of course, they don't realize, I don't think they realize the full meaning of that. You know, it's like, but, and of course, a lot of those concerts you've got a lot of drugs and stuff around. I mean, it's quite interesting now, this whole thing, what's going to happen. It's quite interesting when Qatar has banned alcohol from the stadium. I don't, I mean.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because World Cup's about to happen, but yes, they have, haven't they?
Yeah, yeah. So and I just think because a lot of people go there because that's their way of getting out of themselves, in this massive collective. But that massive collective wouldn't work in the same way without alcohol, because in all the other times they've gone there with alcohol. Everyone thinks it's fine, it's just drink.
So maybe it'll help some people. I'm not saying wake up, but it might make them suddenly see things in a very different way. Watching a football match sober might make them think, I quite enjoy this.
Yeah, well, I know. I just think, it's going to make people think differently. I think that's important. But, I mean, that's the whole mystery of alcohol and world evolution, what it is, what it's been, and what it should be. It's kind of big question here in this building where they've introduced it. Some people question that.
Because we're in the Steiner House building at the moment. But, it's... Because it's been turned into a theatre, they feel it's part of the social side of it. But I call alcohol devil's water.
Well, it is, in a sense. I mean, that's, to me, I said it sort of hinted at, I think it was a mistake. Because instead of saying, what groups are we appealing to? We should be appealing to the sort of Graham Hancocks and beyond, into those alternatives. And then we can add something to it. And then we should really be looking. Whereas just conforming, getting plays in, and then having out, you know what I mean? It's not, for me, that's the easy way. That's a short, making a mistake. Let's just do what everyone else is doing instead of really being radical. I mean, I know I can write stuff which is really interesting. I mean, I think the problem is that Steiner's mystery dramas are not able to do that. I mean, much as they're great spiritual documents, then they're too loaded with anthro jargon. And all the characters are already sort of, we believe in reincarnation already. There's no sort of transitional stage, and you need to bring that to make a drama relevant. So, I'm hoping they will understand that. I'm working on stuff. But I was going to bring this thing, I think I said it earlier. I just quoted from the Steiner book, which surprised me. He said that art, you can't have a deadline to it. True art cannot be confined like that. It has to have its own. Whereas the whole world now is all about deadlines, about economic. Can you package it? Package it. So, the real stuff is can't do that. It's got to evolve in its truth.
Because I really believe in that. I find that no book that I've ever written is ever really finished, but you have to stop it at some point so I can publish it. But I am.
Yeah. Well, I mean that is the problem. I mean, there's the Ahrimanic forces. But as much as possible, you should weigh it in the direction of letting the thing unfold properly to what it has to be, rather than, being impelled by ambition or, all that stuff that people get,
Because I think there is a calling out there from people who maybe aren't into anthroposophy or theosophy or whatever, but they do want some kind of spiritual entertainment, I think. With perhaps moral messages to them, but not being preached at the same time.
No, I think that's where art comes in. It's indirectly direct. I mean, they want to feel a sense of beauty, and all those things have to be. That they are real, and I think that's important. Art is should be a great task. That's to do with the redemption of Lucifer, in a way, to illuminate the world through art. So, but art, in the time of the Renaissance, the artists were trained in real skills, multiple skills. Whereas today, that was in the last 30, 40 years, most art schools, they didn't bother with that. It's all about installations. I mean, I know a guy, he's a brilliant artist. He said he was completely marginalized at the art college, They didn't appreciate it. They wanted, some splash and bash or a bit of Andy Warhol with a bit, you know what I mean?
They're not looking for something that's an actual creative piece that you can look at and get something from. Maybe you still have to study it a bit. Instead, they want something that's so obscure that everybody's on abstracts, maybe. Though everyone's got a different opinion to it.
Well, they want, even the obscurities, not the fascination. I mean, some abstract art was very interesting. I mean, it's quite. I look at a lot of different things. I mean, some of the 1930s, some of the stuff. Some is overrated, like Mondrian. It's just basically geometry with rulers and bits of colour. There's nothing. I mean, some Picasso is very interesting. Not all of it. I mean, the Weeping Woman is an amazing picture. Guernica. I mean, those are And there were in some of the Steiner says about the Impressionists, they were really Ahrimanic, and the Expressionists were Luciferic, which is some truth. It doesn't necessarily invalidate them, but there are some works of art now you just think, what? This is nothing, you know. I mean, actually, to be quite honest, the woman who works in the healing thing here, she's very nice person, but she had some stuff down in the foyer. I don't know if you saw it. And she had little frames, and there was just a bit of paint. £795. I just thought, what? You know, I just thought that, I mean, she's just fallen and conformed to the whole bullshit thing, you know. If I put a price on it, oh, it must be good. They don't, you know, it's bullshit, you know, it's nothing. I mean, I do a lot of drawing now, and I'm eventually going to go into colour, but I think drawings are good for me now. And my golden rule is not to use a ruler or a compass. Even I make very geometrical, very symmetrical forms as well, but don't, you know, have no artificial aids. The only given is the shape of the paper and the pencil and no rubber. That's it. And that to me is going the opposite direction, because often you get stuff at the Tate Modern, as you know, got a lot of computers or, you know, videos, and yet what they're using them for is just banality. You know, there's nothing. The brilliance is in the technology, not in anything they're doing, you know.
I was about to say that it is, and that's what I was wondering about, because we was talking before about the rock bands through their technology. Now we've got artists doing it through their technology.
Yeah.
And I'm quite a strong believer in that Ahriman, Lucifer, any dark forces, they can flow through the currents of electricity.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, there's the latest thing, is maybe we get robots to do really better art. You know, you think, oh, just total, you know, misses the point. It's just, yeah. But that's what I would, you know, my hope I can bring before I leave this physical world, you know, in the art world and the theatre and stuff, you know. But my thing is also that I can't force it. I've got to allow the thing to, you know, I've done a lot of work already, but I mean, I can't just be forced by somebody's calendar. We've got to put on the show, you know. I'm saying, no, you know, why, you know.
So when you're doing your art, so you're not using any rulers, you're doing it all freehand.
All freehand.
So you're not. Do you feel you're not being influenced by any kind of elemental?
Well, no. I mean, I think I get. You know, I think I'm tapping into some of the better elemental beings. You know, it's revealing. I believe that I get understanding of shapes and forms which you couldn't get if you use these artificial aids. You know, it's like it's a whole different world of inspiration. But it requires an endless work by yourself. It's not just, you know, program something and then do that. Wasn't it brilliant? You know? Yeah.
Because the elementals do want to work with us, don't they? But if we ignore them, we go to the dark side.
Yeah. They're waiting to. I mean, they are working in certain people's artworks. You know, I mean, some of the anthro artists working with color, and also the biodynamic farmers. They're working with elementals. You know, and the best kind of Steiner teachers work with them as well. You know, with the children. There are areas, you know, but what hasn't yet happened, because it's not easy, is a major challenge to the materialistic paradigm, the cosmology that people are casually putting over to the world. People like Brian Cox. All that lot just putting over this thing they are convinced this is the real, this is it. That's not yet being challenged. Most anthroposophists don't really want to face that head on. They'll talk about Steiner, but to really see, you know, what are they saying about the stars? Now, how can we reconcile that with what Steiner says? How can we understand why they're saying that? Understand what they're speaking about, and explain why they get these perceptions through their instruments of these particular things. But, you know, to really understand it is the instrument itself, which is a sense organ to a certain extent of this Ahrimanic force, is itself determining the concept that arises when you get your perception through it. You know, all those elements. But because Ahriman is, in his own one-sided way, an incredibly intelligent being, he makes it very, very difficult for us to unravel, you know. And he casts a very powerful spell. I mean, a lot of these geeks, one big error in my view, people say, oh, if Leonardo reincarnated again, he'd be a geek. He wouldn't be a geek. He would be a spiritual genius, you know, and he would see through. And most geeky characters, what they're doing is Ahrimanic forces are flowing up through their fingers into their brains, and they're actually become extensions of Ahriman's intelligence. It's not really theirs, you know. And the other thing is all this video game stuff. I mean, I think this is, you know, it's like you can develop your own capacities of consciousness without using those kind of ways. You know, it's a huge, and also it's strange enough, it kind of diverts one's moral compass, because the most popular game is this Grand Theft Auto,
Yes,
which is
quite
all
violent.
about yeah. So that's what it is. It appeals and it draws out and exaggerates that and makes it part of. So people become addicted. I mean, it's very easy to get addicted in all sorts of ways. I know that. I mean, I have to fight off that addiction thing.
But isn't that addiction thing also the Ahriman that's in us coming through? It's like it takes over our eyes, so it's watching it. The videos,
in a way,
and getting involved.
yeah. So, but on another sense, what addiction is the flip side of the creative faculty. You know, it's like, you know, often very creative people can get addicted very easily. You know, because you get on a real roll with your creativity, and then it doesn't. Then you need, you know, so maintaining.
Pulled away, dragged away.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the greatest artists, the very greatest, overcame them. I mean, then there aren't very many of those. I mean, when you think about the high Renaissance, Leonardo, Michelangelo, definitely sublimated there and overcame those, you know, those things. And perhaps Bach and Mozart, they did as well. But, you know, to modern artists, it's a constant struggle. Like, say, Dylan Thomas, you know, becomes an alcoholic. You know, a lot of them suffer from drugs, alcohol, you know, so because you're entering a dangerous world when you're creative. You're sailed by luciferic beings and all kinds of things. But, has to happen.
So how do we work upon ourselves with this luciferic and Ahrimanic stuff going on in the technology? You know, sometimes it's difficult just to turn the computer off.
Oh, it's very difficult. I mean, it's very tempting. I probably watched a bit of stuff tonight, but I'd ration myself because I know the effects. But it's because it gives you, the technology gives you this sense of connection. You know, on the other sense, if you live alone as I do, you know, you feel, you know, the radio's on. It's like it's a company, you know. So all those things are feeding into it. You've just got to be aware of when it becomes excessive and out of hand. You know, when it's substitute for anything that you can develop inwardly. If you know, all this, in fact, you've got so many channels on TV, so many films possible, that you don't have to invent anything. You don't, you know, everything is there. You've got a massive smorgasbord of stimulations, you know, which you can. But I do think, on the other hand, you have to, it's like it's a homeopathic dose. You have to bend a little bit, otherwise you break. You've got to acknowledge it a bit and be discriminating about it, sense what it's doing. I mean, I watch some very bad films, but because I know I can say why I think it's bad. If I'm thinking, I go, what is wrong with this, you know. But it's a very unique time. You know, the attack on human beings is tremendous. If it's not in that way, then it is in the sense of people being very poor or being subjected to, you know, autocratic regimes, being, you know, abused in all kinds of ways. And in our society, the abuse is much more subtle and much more, you know.
What about we were talking about the scientists earlier. How can we perhaps put across to the scientists what it is that they're missing from their scientific endeavours?
Well, I think you've got to explain, show some of the logical problems in their ideas. And this thing I think about the radio set in the brain, you know, you're showing something which, you know, think about that. Or, you know, I say, you know, you look at a corpse and a sleeping person. For a while, they look the same, but eventually the corpse falls apart. So what that's saying is that there's something in the sleeping person that is no longer in the corpse. It's not visible. You know, there are all kinds of ways in which you can point to some kind of superphysical reality. Like this idea, we don't go to the moon. You know, we do, but we don't. You know, to really question these assumptions that people make. And we get all the time, we get photographs of planets, or we got all these photographs of viruses. That's not what they see. I mean, you've got this tiny thing in a petri dish or whatever it is, and then it's coloured up and pumped up, and it's in an electron microscope itself. These things are making things themselves, and they give us these pictures, and we've got to develop our own true imaginations. And the whole, what Goethe, the idea that when you look at something, you are involved in the looking. It's not just an objective external thing. That's what one will gradually got to get over to the scientists. It will happen. It'll prove itself eventually. But it's very difficult because the infection of certain people's minds with the Ahriman is very, very strong. So they really believe that what they have is the real, the illogical, everything that's just superstition. It's a complete misunderstanding of the history of consciousness and how humanity, just like in a child, through our early childhood, we grow up through all the earlier states of civilization. Consciousness, we're surrounded by the percepts of the time we're living in, to present day, but we go through the ancient Egyptian, into the Greek Roman. We actually go through the consciousness similar to that, but it's also permeated, just as when you take an LSD trip, you go back to the old moon consciousness, but you're surrounded by all the percepts of the present time, plus all the memories of all the percepts. That's what gives this extraordinary sort of confused state. So that we need a new psychology. We need a new science on every level.
So if we understood Rudolf Steiner's cosmology before we did an acid trip, we would probably make sense of an acid trip and make more use of it.
Absolutely. You'd understand what the different drugs do. I mean, you could understand it even without going into it, really. I mean, I've only taken marijuana, not only a couple of times in my life. And I was, really high. But that's, some drugs, what they do is they lift out of the vital organs, which are infused with the powers of very high beings. They are, these are things which we normally can't control ourselves. I mean, the great yogis can get some mastery over these forces, but it takes a tremendous training. Certain drugs like cocaine lifts the vital forces out and puts them in your head. So wow, but what's that? The price you pay is you're depleting your body of those forces. So it's going to weaken you eventually. They all do different things. Alcohol puts you back into a time before the ego was fully in the body.
Oh, maybe can you explain that a bit more about the alcohol?
Well, their earlier times, human beings were clairvoyant because their ether body was also more outside the physical body. And they were also receiving things from the spiritual worlds. So they had a consciousness quite different. They could see nature spirits, but they didn't have such a clear objective sense of the physical world. And so in a way that had to develop true individuality. That had to for a while be damped down so that they could come down to earth and see and measure and weigh and number. That was the necessary stage. And alcohol assisted in that. It killed off that old clairvoyance, and it made people. If you could speak to most people in alcohol, they don't like talking about spirituality.
No.
And that's because, and that was a very important stage to go through. But now we've got the opposite. That was water into wine. Now it's wine back into water in a new way, because to awaken the new clairvoyance, we must eventually free ourselves from what alcohol does, because alcohol drives the ego out, which was very important for our world evolution. And when the ego goes out, then the unformed astrality just goes riot. It just, the morality goes. It kills your conscience. Alcohol is a conscience killer. And many, many, many bad crimes are done under the influence of alcohol in all kinds of ways. So, and in the less where people are just tippling away in our modern secular culture, it's not that they're doing violent crimes in that sense, but what's happening is that they're in a state of consciousness where they will not be able to accept spiritual ideas. So they become, it goes with a little bit of atheism, atheistic material. It reinforces it, no doubt about it. And it's not that one's Puritan. I'm just saying that if you want to reach highest levels of creativity and mastery of form and shape and colour, then stop drinking alcohol. You're not going to. And what will happen eventually is that the body will make its own up to the level in which it can use. The Dionysian will arise, but mastery is mastered. It's not something you have to get from the outside to, you know. But, yeah.
Sorry, go on.
All the drugs, they do something slightly different, you know, say cocaine, and they all do different things. But they're also all replays to a certain extent of early stages of evolution and ancient initiations, but done inappropriately. You know, so.
Because I think it's to do with also, like you were saying about the ancient initiations, of that's part of what really helps us become truly creative. But hopefully this will influence, because I know a lot of people and artists who won't do anything unless they've had a drink or had a spliff, because they feel that's what sets their creativity. And I myself was like that many years ago.
I know that now. Even now, I mean, I very rarely drink coffee. I have decaf, but if I have a real coffee, wow, it's like, I mean, like, you know. But so I don't. It's nice occasionally, I feel, but I know I mustn't get into it. Regular mustn't depend on it, you know. It's because that's another one which activates, steals energy from one part of the body to give you a high, you know. And the whole great spiritual path is that you get your higher energy from the gradual Jacob's ladder of meditation.
I wanted to finish on one thing that we were talking about earlier today, because I think it's a really interesting subject about why humanity or human hasn't really been to the moon. And you was explaining about.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll say, of course, it is this question of, yes, in one way, people were walking on the moon, but like with all these things, they were encased in suits. They couldn't be as we are now on the Earth, and that means in a way they weren't really there. They were partly there, but not really completely there. And they can never be there in that way. So it's like, and that gives you a distorted picture of what it really is, because if you take off your suit, you'll die, you know, very quickly. And and then you would see things about the moon that you wouldn't see in the normal sense. And that's true. Even the bottom of the ocean, you can't go as you are. You know, you have to go down in a submersible, and so what you're getting, all these pictures that they got in Attenborough gets of the ocean. It's very, you know, in a way, the way to reach down into that realm is through imagination. Because, I mean, in a way, a lot of those shapes and those creatures, those fish and things that live in the deeps, you know, some of them are bioluminescent, they're kind of memories, or like forms of astral states of the human being in ancient times that had to be put down into the depths of the ocean. What you're seeing is astral entities which become physicalized in the depths. But even those physicalizations are in question, because if you take one of those creatures up to the surface, they immediately just dissolve, break up, explode, you know, because they can't live. So it's like they were pressed down. It's rather like, in a sense, it's like the dark web. It's there in a dark web, and in the dark web you have these things that can't exist on the surface, you know. So it's an incomplete perception of how we gain our ideas and concepts of the universe. We don't, the orthodox science doesn't question, I'm looking through a telescope, I've separated this from nature, put it in a lab, put it in this, and I've tagged it with little, you know, so it's a complete abstraction. And then from that they extrapolate the ultimate reality. And that's also the particle collider. You know, because I've often said, what they do in a particle only happens in a particle collider. It's not as if you can say, these are universal laws. You're mucking around with electricity and magnetism in a way. And then from that, you're saying, oh, this is the universe, this is how it works. So it's almost like saying you smash bricks together, and every time you smash a brick to another brick, it breaks in a particular unique way, you know. It's just so, and all that money that's spent on this huge abstraction, you know.
Most amount of money spent by all the different countries.
Yeah.
It's one of my favourite subjects. I'm quite fascinated. I think that's how they're going to try and build they're opening dimensions, aren't they?
They would like to encircle the whole earth. I mean, it's an ultimate example of the prophets of Baal. I mean, that's what we're dealing with, a re-emergence of that, you know, which is the whole thing that the being of Elijah had to fight against, you know, and that is what, to a certain extent, what's being experienced, or what will be experienced, because it's a priesthood, following that. It's very sad because you hear people you think are very sincere natured. You go on the radio and they're all enthused about it. You think, oh God, because you think some of these people are very good intentioned, and maybe one day they will awaken. But then there are others who are hardened into this. They won't. So it's even in that world, there's people who are, and in the anthroposophical world, there are probably some people who will go the other way eventually.
But is that their insides? Either they're Lucifer or they're Ahriman trying to stop them seeing things in it's just a rationalistic way they're looking at things, aren't they?
Yeah. Also because it's partly because maybe they had a very strong incarnation previously, and maybe the Ahrimanic forces are very afraid that they will spiritually awake, so they make a target of certain beings to use them. They didn't succeed with Steiner, but a lot of human beings who are very advanced can be attacked precisely because they want to make them change sides.
So take heed, people that are listening. You just don't be distracted by the dark forces. Keep on your path of light and spirituality.
Look at the great wonders of the world, the creation, whether it's architecture, works of art, or the great philosophies, the great spiritual books like the Bhagavad Gita. All those things are amazing. And then even the wonders of the material world. Look at that too. Our material, what we've done. There's some extraordinary things. You can understand that. And observe nature. Look at you. Just get more observant, more awake. That's wonder, curiosity.
Well, thank you very much, Patrick.
That's right.
Hopefully we should do some more of these. So everybody, This is Patrick Dixon, and we're going to hopefully do some more different shows. Patrick, do you have? You haven't got any plays or anything coming up yet, but you are on that.
I am working on that. I've got a talk coming up actually on Friday.
So this will probably be going out on Friday, so it'll be too late for that. But they can look out for you because you don't have a website yet, do you?
No, I don't. I've got another talk coming up in January, but I will be having performances at some point. Yeah, I'm working on stuff, but it's like this thing. I can't force it. I'd say it's growing, So.
And this your talk in January at Steiner House?
Yeah.
So it's January 2023.
I'm not sure what the exact date of the talk is, but it's in that cycle of talks.
So if you want to come along to hear Patrick talk, look up the website.
It'd be in the events program. Yeah.
So thank you very much, Patrick. I'm looking forward to doing more soon.
Welcome. Yeah, it's good.